Well, this isn't the Navarrete fight that anyone's asking for, but I'll take it. What's good? It's Wug. We've got Emanuel Navarrete, 38 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw, defending his WBO junior lightweight title against Oscar Valdez, 32 wins and 2 losses. This is a rematch from a fight that they just had in 2023, just last year, August of 2023, in a very competitive fight, but one that Emanuel Navarrete put up one of his career best performances. When you think about how the fight was perceived going into it, how rough it was throughout the first half of the fight, and then how Emanuel Navarrete basically outdid himself when it comes to his punch volume. Like, he is one of the fighters who I consider to be must-see TV. I'm not saying that he's a pound-for-pound top 10 guy, although he has kind of flirted with that list when he went on his run, especially at 126 featherweight. But because of Navarrete's style, I just feel like from a pure entertainment standpoint, he's somebody who you just have to see to believe because of his ability to basically drown his opponent's inactivity. Like, there are a few fighters who put their opponents on what I call the treadmill from hell, to where you could hang with them in spots. You could even potentially hurt them. But if you can't match them, if not with output, well, then to do something to stem the tide and to force them to reduce their volume. If you can't do that, you are gonna get drowned. And when Navarrete was about to fight the 2-division champion, Oscar Valdez, there were a lot of people, including myself, who thought that Valdez had a good chance at catching Navarrete with something big because of how Navarrete dives into the pocket, sometimes recklessly. He crosses his feet. He doesn't do anything, through conventional means. And he's, again, just throwing so many punches that theoretically that should create openings for you to blast him to hell. And fight over fight, I've been waiting for somebody to do it, but just haven't seen it. Yes, he did get hurt really badly and dropped viciously by Liam Wilson before stopping Liam Wilson in the 9th round. But by and large, we haven't seen him fully pay the penalty for his relentless avalanche of punches. Case in point, there was a period in that Navarrete versus Valdez 1 fight where Valdez was more or less, he was very competitive. There were some close rounds, and I think Navarrete won the vast majority of them, but they were close and competitive rounds. And, Valdez was very much in the fight, like through 8-9 rounds. Navarrete visibly hurts his hand to where in the 9th round, he's shaking it, he's trying to adjust his glove, and he stops throwing punches with his right. He goes back to the corner and acknowledges that his hand is hurt. So then he comes out for the next round, and I'm wondering, oh shoot, so what the hell's gonna happen here? Because Valdez isn't the guy to hurt your hand against and to be one-handed against. So then what does Navarrete do? The very next round, with the bad hand, Navarrete comes out and throws like a fight high 120 punches or something like that. It was just unbelievable. Like, just when you think that he can't exceed his own work rate, he does just that. And now I feel like we've seen this fight over fight over fight ever since he made a splash by taking Isaac Dogbay's belt and beating him by decision, a vicious beatdown that Dogbay suffered by the end of that. They run it back, and then Navarrete stops Isaac Dogbay. And that fight, by the way, is still the only time Isaac Dogbay has ever been stopped in that rematch against Navarrete. So ever since that, and that was at 122, where Emanuel Navarrete's unusual reach, like, he's about 5'7", but he's got a 72-inch reach. That's Floyd Mayweather's reach. That's Errol Spence's reach. Navarrete had that at 122. So one thing about Navarrete's career that's been a little bit unfortunate. Yes, he is a 3-division title holder, and he did try to go up and win a 4th title at 135, but lost via decision to Dennis Berichick, who currently holds that WBO title, who I think Keyshawn Davis will ultimately get a shot against, maybe in his next fight. But Navarrete is a 3-division champion, but he has left so much meat on the plate when it comes to opponent selection. And a lot of that is because of promotional politics. Every promoter, unless Turki Al-Sheikh steps in, or in the rare cases where you get like cross-promotional efforts, it's by and large island by island by island, right? So on the top rank side, you've had Navarrete win a belt at 122. He never unified any of the other titles. He won a vacant belt at 126 against Ruben Villa, and he just held on to that one belt through a few title defenses against Joet Gonzalez, against Christopher Diaz, against Eduardo Baez in his final fight at featherweight, but never unified any titles there. He goes to 130. He gets dropped against Liam Wilson, but again comes back and stops Wilson to capture a belt in a third division. It was a vacant title. He never unifies anything there. So he's been the WBO champion in 3 different divisions, and again he was trying to do the same at lightweight. So it's just been frustrating in the sense that yes, he has beaten a couple really good opponents. He again fought Isaac Dogboe twice. He beat Oscar Valdez, but like at 126 I would have really wanted to see him fight, you know, Gary Russell Jr., who, I get it, didn't fight any of the other top 126 pounders aside from Johnny Gonzalez way back in the day, right? And Jojo Diaz. But I would have wanted to see Navarrete fight Mauricio Lara when he was making a big run, and you know, when he had knocked out Josh Warrington and then stopped Lee Wood. I would have loved to have seen Navarrete versus Lee Wood, or even Ray Vargas, or, you know, Robesi Ramirez. They were in the same division for a little bit at the same time. Or who wouldn't have wanted to see Emanuel Navarrete versus Brandon Figueroa, right? Just style-wise, Figueroa is another guy who could drown his opponents. It's a very rare thing. William Zepeda does it, although all of them do it through their own unique methods and unique styles. But yeah, Navarrete, there are so many fighters who I would have wanted to see him fight at featherweight, even at 130, that we didn't get to see him fight. And now 3 fights after he just beat Oscar Valdez, which again, very impressive victory, where Navarrete's next 2 fights were a draw against Robson Conceição. And in that fight, I mean, we've seen Conceição get that controversial win against O'Shaquie Foster, and then a pretty close and disputed loss to O'Shaquie Foster. So he won the title from O'Shaquie Foster, then it lost it back to Foster. But before that, Navarrete fought Conceição, and they like set some record for like punches thrown or punches landed. It was some ridiculous amount of trading punches. But Conceição, we've seen him fight several good fighters now. We've seen him against Shakur Stevenson, against Oscar Valdez, again recently twice against O'Shaquie Foster. Conceição has fought some really good opponents, and against Navarrete, he more or less gave about as good as he got. I thought Navarrete deserved the win and was a little bit surprised that they called it a draw, but it was a very competitive fight, and it was a war. And then after that, Navarrete, while retaining his WBO 130-pound title, went up to 135, and that's where he lost that very close and competitive fight against Dennis Baricek. So after those 2 fights, after fighting Valdez, he's now circling back and rematching Oscar Valdez, who's only fought once since that loss to Navarrete, and it was a stoppage over Liam Wilson. He knocked him out in the 7th round. That was a 6 to 7 round war, by the way. Very tough fight. And both of these guys, Navarrete and Valdez, have now been in their share of all-out wars. So yeah, I would have wanted to see them kind of mix up the scheduling and the opponent selection, especially for Navarrete, because you want to see how that style would go against certain fighters. You have these kind of, you know, dream matchups that we never see take place, again, because the promotions are so siloed with their respective rosters. So with Navarrete, another thing that's been a little bit interesting to witness is that he was like a physical freak at 122. He was still kind of physically freakish with that reach, and again, with that crazy high volume style, unorthodox high volume style at 126. It becomes less so when he goes up in weight again to 130, where you do still have a reach advantage usually, but now these guys size-wise are catching up with you. So a lot of those physical advantages that you enjoyed back at 126 and 122, you don't have those same natural physical advantages at 130, and especially not at 135. And Navarrete said that he's not ruling out trying 135 again. I just think that he's going to have to kind of backdoor his way into a title win at 135, because again, he gets hit, and he's not like a devastating one punch guy. Again, he could drown you if you're not willing to keep up or able to either hurt him or to keep up with his activity. But 135, it's totally different animals there. And I just don't think that Emanuel Navarrete's style will translate well where the guys are basically bigger than him. So now he's back at 130 and he's rematching Oscar Valdez, who again is a 2-division champion, 126 and 130. His only other loss was against Shakur Stevenson. That was Valdez's first loss, and again has only had one fight since that brutal loss to Emanuel Navarrete. So because of the way that the promotions work out, Valdez with only one win is right back in line for another title shot against Navarrete. So again, this isn't really a rematch that the people were clamoring for, but it's not a bad fight. I mean, the first fight was tremendous, and there is no guarantee that the same thing is going to play out in this rematch. I really wonder how these wars might impact either one of these guys. Are either of them less punch resistant? Are either of them less able to absorb hard shots like they've been able to this point of the career? Because, you know, as it stands, neither one of these guys has ever been stopped, Navarrete or Valdez. So as I look at this matchup rematch, I'm thinking Valdez cannot let this build into the high volume pace that Navarrete insists. He's got to get his respect, because if this devolves into that avalanche of activity, then Valdez, I believe, only has a puncher's chance. He's gonna have to like punch with Navarrete, punch between Navarrete's punches. And again, even when Navarrete lunges in, and if he misses, you would think that he's in range to get countered, but then Navarrete's usually pretty good at pulling back. So he'll like cross his skis, miss with a punch, lunging in, but then will pull back. So then his opponent returns fire but misses. Oscar Valdez is going to have to do something either timing wise or angle wise to change the flow of this fight up. Valdez needs to have his Liam Wilson moment against Emanuel Navarrete to have a chance in this one, because otherwise we'll get more of the same. We'll get close and competitive rounds that Navarrete wins because he's throwing 70 to 110, 120 punches. If you're not able to demonstratively hurt Navarrete, it's hard to win 7 rounds against the guy, period. But I do think Valdez, I think that he's got the power to do it. And I don't know what Navarrete's weight cut is going to be like, because, you know, Navarrete's always been a little bit soft around the midsection, but having gone to 135 and now you're coming back to 130, Navarrete doesn't strike me as a guy, and he admittedly doesn't live that super disciplined fighter lifestyle in terms of his diet. So is he going to be able to somewhat comfortably make it to 130, or, you know, is he going to lose his title on the scale for this fight? Valdez, on the other hand, is like a shorter fighter. He's got shorter arms. He's able to naturally make the weight limit a bit easier. This is just kind of what I'm seeing. Although if Navarrete was more disciplined, I'm sure that he can make these weights a lot easier. But yeah, I just wonder if he's going to be in top form coming back down from 135. And I wonder if that loss to Baranchyk, not to mention the draw against Conceição, has Navarrete kind of wondering if he still has it like he used to have it, right? So I wonder if these last 2 fights, the draw and the split decision loss, are a motivator for Navarrete to really kind of kick it into high gear, discipline-wise, training-wise, to where it's like, okay, you know, I can't afford to really lose again, because then you're kind of on a career slide. And I'm sure that Navarrete at some point does want to become a 4-division champion. There are very few Mexican fighters, very few any fighters really, who've become 4-division champions, but there's only a small group of Mexican fighters that have won belts in 4 different divisions. Navarrete is not far off from getting that, and it already seems like it's clear that he's not hell-bent on unifying titles in any particular division. So I'm wondering what his career plan is. Like, what happens if he successfully defends this against Oscar Valdez? Does he then try 135 again, or does he fight an O'Shaquie Foster, who is also on Top Rank? They could actually do a unification title fight there. WBC is held by Foster, WBO would be held by Navarrete. But for Navarrete versus Valdez too, I think that Valdez is going to come out, and I think that he's going to try to draw the line in the sand to where he can start backing Navarrete up in spots, and also just be ready to throw punches with Navarrete as Navarrete dives in. Navarrete got off to an unusually fast start against Valdez in their first fight. Usually Navarrete takes a few rounds to really get cooking, and then he starts picking up the activity as the rounds go on. He came out the gate in round 1 and you know, hit Valdez very hard, very cleanly, and threw a lot of punches in that first round. And on Mark Kriegel's unofficial scorecard, Navarrete won the first 3 rounds against Valdez. Valdez can't afford to let that happen in this rematch, because again, if he does start to fall behind, then he's going to be reduced to only having a puncher's chance. And yes, he does have a pretty damn good puncher's chance, but if Emanuel Navarrete is still Navarrete volume wise, punch absorption wise, just durability wise, just having the foot on the gas constantly and still being skilled enough to get out of the way of some of the biggest punches, if Navarrete is still able to do that, Navarrete should still win this fight against Oscar Valdez. But you know they're gonna have a good game plan cooked up between Eddie Reynoso and Valdez. So I'm looking for Valdez to make some key adjustments to not let Navarrete get away with throwing so many punches without getting clipped badly. I just think that there's a higher likelihood, because look, I'm looking at this like, you know, I was one of the few when I made a prediction video for this first fight that Valdez doesn't have to knock Navarrete out to win the fight. I thought that he could, you know, drop Navarrete, or he could hit him hard enough to really get his respect and edge some of those swing rounds to maybe win on the cards. I still think that that's true to a point, but I feel like it's a little bit more feast or famine in this rematch for Oscar Valdez. I would be really surprised if he could outbox Navarrete to where he wins majority of the rounds. I just think that the highest likelihood, even in this rematch, is that Navarrete starts rolling downhill, and if he does get clipped and hurt badly, that he's able to pour it on offensively, even when he himself is hurt, like he did against Liam Wilson. I think that Navarrete could punch his way out of danger to where he could still win more rounds than Oscar Valdez. I mean, that's to beat Navarrete round over round, you've got to do something to reduce that punch output. And so I think that Valdez almost needs to put Navarrete's lights out to win this one. He's got to do something very dramatic. I just think, again, it's just a higher likelihood that Navarrete starts making this look like a Navarrete fight. And again, assuming that these last couple fights against Conceição and Barichek didn't take too much out of Navarrete, that this won't be the fight that Navarrete pays for his ultra aggression. So I'm going with Navarrete to win this one via unanimous decision again. I think that Valdez is going to have his moments. I think this is going to feature a lot of competitive and close rounds like the first fight did, but I think that Navarrete is still going to be able to do enough to insist on there being several exchanges to where Valdez is just unable to keep up with the activity. But look, I wouldn't be surprised if these last few fights, because look, he lost against Barichek, he drew against Conceição where he got hit a ton, he had that, you know, that great performance, but he took a lot of shots from Valdez in their first fight. And then before that, he had that fight against Liam Wilson where he got hurt badly multiple times, got dropped, scarily dropped, to where he tumbled over and was in all types of bad shape against Liam Wilson. So it hasn't been a pretty stretch for Navarrete, even if he's won a couple of those fights in impressive fashion. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's caught up with Navarrete. I'm just going with what I see as the highest likelihood, and I'm going with Emanuel Navarrete to win this one via decision. But yeah, if he does win this, I hope that he fights O'Shaquie Foster. If Valdez wins this one, I assume that they would run it back for a third fight, depending on how this rematch plays out, and depending on whether Navarrete wants to stay at 130 versus going back to 135 and trying again there. But if Valdez wins, I would either want to see a rubber match between these two, or I would want to see Valdez fight O'Shaquie Foster, so we could finally get some featherweight title unification fights, because I feel like for the last couple generations of featherweights, we haven't gotten that. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Navarrete versus Oscar Valdez 2. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. How do you see this playing out? What do you think Oscar Valdez needs to do differently to change the outcome of this rematch? And do you think that Navarrete or Oscar Valdez, that the wars have caught up with either guy? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.